Join the army? Travel the world? Meet lots of interesting people, then take them out? With this joke, my best friend Simon talked me into joining the army. He'd been in 2 years already and said it was a great life. I even joined the same unit he was in and then volunteered for the same special duties outfit he'd joined. The training was grueling, but we helped each other through it. Our outfit was based in a large regional center and life was pretty stable. In fact, we both fell in love and got married within a month of each other. Myself to a real cutie named Pam. By the time I'd done 10 years service, I'd been happily married for 8 and begat 2 daughters I adored, Kate 7 and Melissa 5. Unlike some army units, mine didn't move around. We did have to go out on jobs for periods of 2 days to 2 weeks, but not that often. I was home at the normal time about 300 by 365 days a year. So life was as normal as can be. I had a wife I loved and a family I would gladly die for. Then, of course, Osama bin Jerk did his thing, and through some convoluted logic thing, Simon and I were invited to holiday in Iraq that year. It was rough parting from the family, but that's what both Pam and I'd signed on for. We did our job throughout the build-up and invasion, and were quietly getting excited about going home. That was dashed when our mob was given a lecture by the regimental political officer. We were to stay and fight to maintain the peace. Simon, ever the larrikin, couldn't help giving the politico a hard time. "Sir, fighting for peace, isn't that a bit like screwing for virginity?" It was cathartic to see a room full of burly soldiers laughing their heads off while the lecturer went a bright shade of angry. Well, as history shows, the peace was more violent than the invasion. At least the enemy wore uniforms during the invasion. We lost more guys in that period than ever before. Our outfit was busier than most, deploying for up to 4 weeks at a time behind enemy lines before going back to base for 2 weeks. Well, I say enemy lines. No one could mark them on a map, though. No one could tell us when we were likely to go home. Every second night, when in base, I used Skype to talk to Pam, Kate, and Mel. That way, at least, they won't have forgotten what I look like by the time I get back. 3 weeks into our latest mission, the storm hit the fan. We were supposed to attack a base of about 100 bad guys, but were greeted by about 1,000. There were only 12 of us, so we beat a hasty retreat. It was 2 days before the Blackhawks dared come in and get us. Only 4 of us could still walk, and 3 were dead. Worst of all, Simon, my life support system, had the tendons blown away at the back of his knee. Nothing fatal, but his service career was over. He was flown back to a hospital in our hometown with the other wounded while the rest of us were kept in the country so we could be psychologically returned to a fit state to rejoin the human race. It was obvious to all that we no longer had enough guys to keep going. Cold military planners since the Romans have known that once a force loses more than 10% of its complement, morale takes a tumble. That's probably why whenever a Roman legion retreated from a fight, their own officers would take our every 10th man in a process called decimation. What bastards? Worked, though. Roman legions didn't run from too many fights. 7 days after returning from the mission from hell and 9 months after deploying, I was sitting in the mess tent using my laptop to email one of the new widows of one of my guys. I'd been corresponding with all 3 of them since the Army confirmed they'd been notified officially their husbands were dead. The Army employed a whole bureaucracy to do this, but we were a tight-knit unit, and I knew they would appreciate the personal touch. I knew them all. Unlike me, they all lived on base. This third exchange was very difficult for me. With the first 2, I'd been truthful when I said their husbands died quickly and well. This time I would have to lie. As the ranking officer in my platoon, I made sure all contact with these bereaved ladies went through me. If they were going to hear lies, then they were going to hear consistent lies from me. Suddenly, that little Skype box came on the screen of my laptop. Kate Young is online. Desperate for some human distraction from the emotionally draining task I dialed in. Within seconds, the beautiful face of my eldest graced my screen. I could see she was sitting on the couch in our lounge with her laptop that she'd got last Christmas. "Daddy!" she squealed. That brought her sister over, and soon I was talking to my two reasons to be, and they were talking at me as fast as they could, both at the same time, of course. We chatted merrily for the next half an hour about school, their trip to the zoo that day, and anything else that came into our heads. I could feel myself relaxing. The urge to strike out and destroy something, anything, was slowly receding. I glanced at my watch and calculated that it was getting on for their bedtime, so I tried to wind up our chat. "Where's your mum?" I asked Mel. Katie had wandered off screen somewhere. "Oh, she's in the kitchen with Uncle Mick, Mum's new friend. He went to the zoo with us today," said Mel. My blood froze. Neither Pam nor I had a brother Mick. I fought the sudden sinking feeling. I'd seen this too many times to be anything like relaxed. "How long has Uncle Mick been around?" I asked with as much casualness as I could muster. Hell, I take down people for a living. I'm not a bloody actor. "Since just after Easter, Daddy." That was 2 months ago. The fact that Pam hadn't mentioned any new friends told me all I needed to know. "Does Mum see much of Uncle Mick? How often is he around?" I asked. "Oh, he's around most days." All of a sudden, I heard Kate whispering from off-screen. "Mel, you know Mum doesn't want us to talk about Uncle Mick." Suspicion became certainty. Rage started to build. Control pushed rage back with great difficulty. "Kate, come on screen, please," I barked. Kate appeared looking uncomfortable. "Kate, does Uncle Mick stay for sleepovers?" "Yes, Daddy." With even greater difficulty, I controlled the wild hatred that was in danger of consuming my being. "So do you like Uncle Mick?" I asked. Again, both girls started talking at once. It was impossible to listen to both at the same time. I did catch the words, "slimy," "he smacked me," and "doesn't like us." "Right, shush, girls. Now, Kate, you first." "No, Daddy. We don't like him, and he doesn't like us. He's mean to us when Mum's not around. I think he hurts Mum, too. Sometimes I hear screams from her bedroom when he's having a sleepover." Damn, that hurt. One thing the Army had taught me was how to plan quickly in a crisis. It was a skill I'd honed in many deadly situations. "Does that jacket I see hanging near the front door belong to Mick?" I asked. "Yes, Daddy." "Go and get it, please, Kate, and see if there is a wallet in one of the pockets." She did, there was, and within 5 minutes I had Uncle Mick's full name, address, and license number. There was also a security card from his employer. After Kate helped with that, she went into the garage and got his car details, make, model, and license plate number. "Right, girls, I'm going to make a phone call for a few minutes. Leave your screen on and check when I come back, okay?" My call took over 10 minutes. Thank God Simon's wife Julia was home and not visiting the hospital. I then returned to my screen and called the girls over. "Righty-o, my beautiful princesses. How would you like to go to Auntie Julia's house for a few days?" This was an ever-popular question. Julia and Simon had 3 kids the same age group as my pair and were good friends with them. "Daddy, we haven't seen them for ages," screamed Mel. So Pam was hiding from our friends, was she? "Well, go to your rooms and pack a few clothes and toys. Enough for a few days, and Auntie Julia will pick you up shortly. Now, Kate, I want you to do something for me. Pick up your laptop and carry it screen first into the kitchen and set it down with the screen facing Mum, please. I want to talk to her. Then go and pack." "Okay, Daddy," Kate replied. I was treated to a guided tour of the house while the laptop was carried into the kitchen. As the kitchen door opened, I could see Pam and a man sitting at the table with a bottle of wine between them. They took no notice of Kate as she put the computer on the end of the table. In fact, they were in their own little world until Kate said, "Mum, Dad wants to talk to you." They both spun around like they'd been smacked and stared at the screen. Pam's face had a look of fear, and the man looked like he wanted to slide under the table out of sight. "Hi, Pam, how are you? This must be your friend Mick," I questioned. Their lips moved, but no sounds came out, so I continued. "Come on, Pam. You must have known you'd be caught one day. You must have prepared a little speech for me?" I asked. It was obvious she hadn't. She tried a bluff, not realizing she was the world's worst liar. I mean, it couldn't have been more obvious if she wore a flashing light on her head that went off every time she tried. "He's just a friend, Davy." She barely spoke. "Nonsense, Pam. The girls have already told me that jerk here has been sleeping over the last few weeks." At last, Pam decided to come clean. Her heroic boyfriend tried to get up and leave, but she grabbed his arm and pulled him back to the table. I waited while various possible responses flashed across her face like I was watching a movie. "I'm sorry, Dave, but I got so lonely while you were away. I got to know Mick, and we fell in love." She fell silent. I wanted to rage at them, but realized that would achieve nothing. I forced a calm tone as I continued. "Nonsense, Pam. This is the first time I have been away for more than 2 weeks in the 9 years we have been married. Before we married, I warned you what our life could be like. You accepted it." She didn't acknowledge that I'd even spoken, so I continued. "For the record, dear, the correct sequence should have been to wait till I got home. Wait until I wasn't in a country where being distracted can cause death in an instant. Then, when I was home, tell me you wanted to separate and give me a chance to change your mind. Then after we separated, you could have gone and lived with Jerk here." Looking at the table, Pam mumbled, "Sorry, Dave, it just happened." "So what now, Pam? You're just going to ditch me and sail off into the sunset with Jerk here, are you?" I questioned. She didn't even have the guts to look up. She just nodded. "And in this little fantasy world of yours, you would just take my kids away from me, would you?" Something in my tone made her head jerk up. It was obvious the possibility of that not happening had never occurred to her. "Listen, Pam, you know I'm keen on psychology. Can you remember all the discussions we had about what influences children? Nature or nurture? Heredity or the environment? Well, if the kids go with you, then they will have your cheating woman genes and be brought up in a cheating woman environment. Believe me, cheating woman, it isn't going to happen." Pam reeled back in her chair as if slapped. She'd just heard the first, second, and third abusive words from my mouth ever, and they were in one sentence. Finally, Jerk rallied to her defense. "Now wait a minute!" "Shut the hell up!" I roared. "Another thing the Army teaches you is how to get the instant obedience of people on the other side of a parade ground." He shut up. At that point, there was a distraction off screen, and Pam said she was going to answer the door. I told her to wait. "That will be Julia coming to pick up the kids. She's going to take them to her place tonight and get them off to school tomorrow. They should have packed some stuff already. Make sure they have everything they need, then come back so we can talk in peace." Pam got up, and Uncle Mick got up to join her. "You sit down!" I roared. Again, he bruised his back, sitting down quickly. I just stared at him for the 8 or so minutes it took Pam to come back. The stupid prick even tried to start a conversation about how life was in Iraq. One of the mess stewards came over and replaced my drink. I asked him to make sure I got some privacy. I didn't want any witnesses to the next bit. Finally, Pam rejoined. She started to speak. "Look, Dave, this isn't how I wanted this to go." I shut her down. "I just have 2 questions for you, Mickey boy. The first is, did you know she was married?" I questioned. "I'm sorry, man, I just fell for her." He started talking, but I cut him off. "I'll take that as a yes, then. The second question is, do you know what I do for a living?" I questioned. "Pam says you are in the Air Force in Iraq," he replied. Pam interrupted. "No, he's in the Army." "I thought you said he was in the air something," he argued. "Ah, I can see where the confusion is here. I am in the Army, but in a regiment called the Special Air Service." I could see this hadn't registered with him, so I continued. "You probably know us by an acronym, the SAS." The instant look of terror that hit his face showed me he finally understood. Hell, every bloke in the world knew the SAS. Everyone knew that they wrote the book that every special forces unit in the world learned from. Everyone knew that if you were taken down by the SAS, you didn't even know until Lucifer showed you the action replay. Jerk now knew with crystal clarity that he was in deep, deep trouble. The microphone picked up no noise, but his lips clearly formed the words, "Oh, hell!" So Mr. Michael Brown of 12 Pender Court, Borderdale. The answer to the question of what I do for a living is that I take lives. I leaned in until my face was filling the screen. His face was in a pathetic, pale rictus. "So jerk, for the crime of having an affair with my wife, for destroying my marriage, for putting my daughter's possible happy future at risk. I sentence you to death," I roared. "What?" he asked, terrified. "You heard me. I am going to destroy you." He just sat there with his mouth opening and closing like a goldfish that had jumped out of the bowl. Pam cut in with, "Come now, Dave. Cut the macho stuff. I know you're in the army and all, but how many people have you actually taken down?" Her light tone surprised me. I turned away from staring at Mick's image on the screen to hers. I was further surprised by the slightly challenging expression on her face. I suddenly realized she had no idea what I spent my days doing. As with most Special Forces members, I hadn't advertised what I did. No one outside our close circle of friends knew I was even in the SAS. I certainly didn't tell her what I did in Iraq, mainly because I didn't want her to worry. Keeping my voice level, I replied, "Well, dear, I've been in the base for the last week, so I haven't taken down anyone. But the week before that, I had taken down 10 or 12. It was a bit of a slow week. Sorry, I didn't really count. It didn't seem important at the time. Most of them I shot, but one of them jumped me as I was changing clips and I stabbed him. I stuck my knife in his belly, angled up through his diaphragm until I got his heart. Surely, Pam, your mum must have told you that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach." Through the magic of Skype, we were intently staring at each other from across the world. What she saw was a stranger who she now knew with a deadly certainty was very dangerous and very, very angry. What I saw was someone that was suddenly very, very afraid. What you should know, dear, is that I didn't hate any of those guys. They were just doing their job. I felt absolutely nothing for the guy I knifed even as I watched his lights going out. Now imagine what I would do to people I hate. I heard a gurgling noise from Mick, so I turned my attention back to him. "Are you still here? The further you get away from my house, the longer you live. My knife has an appointment with your throat, and that is a promise you can take to the bank." With an audible moan, he bolted from his chair and off the screen. I heard the door slam. Now it was her doing the goldfish impersonation. I let her collect her thoughts, which, judging from her facial expressions, weren't good. Finally, she whispered, "Are you going to destroy me too?" she asked. This brought me to a standstill. I hadn't decided on her sentence. "Pam, I'm sorry. I haven't decided yet. One thing I do know is that after you brought a third party into my house and had an affair with him where the girls could hear, you are not a fitting mother for my children. Oh yes, Kate told me all about how you scream while he is with you at night. She thinks he is hurting you." I didn't think Pam's expression could get more horrified, but she surprised me. One thing for certain is that my girls will grow up knowing exactly what I think of cheaters. Another pause allowed my thoughts to go from my emotional front brain to my rational center. They were both in agreement. You know that there is much research to suggest that having one parent die can be less damaging to kids than a messy divorce? Not surprisingly, Pam didn't respond to this. She was smart enough to know that simple statement contained two options for her, and neither one was good. "No, Pam. I think I would find it difficult to destroy you. I loved you once, and until now I've had no reason to think you weren't a good mother." Before she got too excited about this, I continued. "So here's the deal, Pam. If, when I find Mickey Boy, and you are with him, then I will destroy you as well. If you go to the police, I will destroy you. If you don't have divorce paperwork ready for me to sign when I get home shortly, I will destroy you. Do your homework, Pam. Look up how many times murderers are convicted when nobody is found. I can assure you that yours won't be." I let this sink in. She looked close to collapse. "Will you really take down Mick?" she questioned. "Pam, this country has changed me. I have seen so many friends die and have taken down so many men that I only have a shred of humanity left. Taking down Mick will cause me no qualms at all. Oh, Pam, if only you had done this the decent way, I would have understood." For the first time, Pam had tears gushing from her eyes. I wanted this over with. "You'd better write this down, Pam. The divorce settlement will give me the house and full custody of the kids. Your visitation will be totally at my discretion and will be what I think is in the best interests of the kids. By the time I get back, you will need to have organized yourself somewhere to live. I will pay for your living expenses for a reasonable time until you are on your feet. I'll send you the details of an army lawyer. The civilian judges seem to listen to them pretty well. When I get back, I'll take an instructor's job at the base so I can be home every night with the girls. We'll get by fine without you. One thing is for sure, I'm not coming back here. Before I got here, I worried that I wouldn't be able to handle being shot at. That wasn't a problem. What does worry me is how much of a soul I will have left if I have to take down many more mothers' sons. It eats you. Good night, Pam. Don't bother to mention any of this by email or phone until I get back. I'll not be set up to take a fall when I get home. Just do everything I said, and you should have a long and happy life. Not one that is anywhere near what could have been, but you made your choice. Now it's time to pay the piper." With that, I closed the connection. I got home 3 weeks later and had an emotional reunion with Kate and Mel. I tried to explain that their mum wouldn't be living with us anymore. They didn't understand, but copious distractions from Julia, Simon, and their kids helped. Every time they met him, they asked Simon why he walked funny. Every time he gave them a different story, more fantastic than the last. I was met by the police when I got off the plane. Michael must have been desperate. They admitted they'd spoken to my wife and she failed to corroborate his story. I didn't try any fancy evasive tactics, but I didn't admit anything either. There was nothing they could do except warn me they would be watching. The divorce went through with only small modifications on my part. I decided to leave it up to my girls how often they saw their mother. I was surprised how their young minds attributed so much blame to her for causing us such pain. They hardly ever chose to see her. Of course, I didn't find out till much later that Julia had a hand in that. Julia was picking them up from school every day, and the fun they were having reconnecting with their old friends, Julia and Simon's children, left little time for a distraught, no-fun mother. Pam did ask me if there was any chance of reconciliation. I just allowed the ruthless monster that now lives within me to stare at her. It was never mentioned again. In fact, she made sure we were never alone after that. I obviously terrified her. I did get the base instructor's job and was home every night. The girls were getting the best upbringing possible, but divorcing parents always have an emotional impact whatever you do. That's why psychologists recommend parents always stay together unless abuse is involved. Yes, life is good. 4 years and 2 months later. Percy Newmont was relaxed. He was bow hunting with his friends out in the wilds. After all this time, sometimes whole hours would go by without him thinking of his former troubles. He looked back at his friend Peter. He and the other two all worked with Percy, and they hung around a lot these days. Peter caught his eye and smiled. Yes, thought Percy, life was good. The only activity he skipped with them was Wednesday night poker. That was when Percy had an affair with Peter's wife. Moving 2 states and finding a new identity had been hard and had wiped Percy out financially, but it worked. He knew that going back to Borderdale last month for his mother's funeral was risky. He'd felt a bit silly in disguise at the back of the church trying to avoid any contact with his relatives. But she was his mother, for heaven's sake. There was a sensation of frontal impact. Then Percy was flat on his back. He looked down at the arrow sticking out of his chest just below his heart. He was momentarily confused. His 3 friends were behind him. How come he'd been hit from the front? He passed out but came to some time later. He was alone with Peter. The others had gone for help. Suddenly, the pain that had brought him around in the first place was repeated. What the hell was Peter doing grabbing the feathers of the arrow and yanking them sideways? And why the hell was he smiling? The pain was too much and Mick passed out again. He drowned in his own blood 10 minutes later without having regained consciousness. The coroner's officer looked down at the body. Every year I get my back dragged out here when some stupid moron accidentally shoots one of their friends. 2 weeks after that. Pam sat in her 12th floor apartment crying. She had been at it for the last 3 hours ever since John, her latest boyfriend, had left. What is wrong with me? She thought. She reviewed her life for the last 4 years. She had really thought that Michael had been the one. She had married Dave because she knew her biological clock was ticking, and it was a way of getting the children she really wanted. So when Michael came along and she saw the opportunity to have her children and a soulmate, she hadn't hesitated. It took a month after Michael disappeared for it to dawn on her that maybe her love for him had been one-sided. Without a glance at her, he had gone forever, even leaving his jacket and wallet behind. Seeking some sort of closure, she'd gone to his apartment and workplace 2 days after he'd fled, but he was gone. What hurt her the most was that he obviously didn't give a shit how she had fared after he bolted. A big source of her depression for the first year or so had been her children. She'd just started the legal process of forcing Julia to return Kate and Mel when David returned from Iraq and quashed that. After that, whenever she rang the girls, their conversation was stilted, as if they blamed her for something. She did see them every week or so until that woman had moved in with Dave 9 months after Pam had moved out. Apparently, she'd been the journalist who covered the story of David and his guys getting their medals. After that, the girls hardly seemed interested in even speaking to her on the phone. She had taken to parking outside the school at the end of the day. Even that stopped when she saw both girls running up and hugging the woman like she were their mother. That year, they hadn't even rung on her birthday. The pain lessened somewhat when she met Pat. He was a few years older than her, but shared her dream of having a family. 8 months later, she moved in with him and they were talking about marriage and children. 2 weeks later, he devastated her by saying he'd met someone else and asked her to leave. A similar thing happened the next year with Randy. They had connected right away and within 2 weeks were inseparable. 4 months later, they moved in together. 3 weeks after that, he dumped her, saying he was getting back together with his ex-wife. Following that, Pam started a series of one-night stands, thinking it would boost her confidence. It had the opposite effect. She really thought that John had been the one. Despite the fact she knew if she didn't have children very soon, it would be too late, she forced herself to move slowly with him. It took over 12 months before she bowed to his gentle pressure and allowed him to move into her apartment. With a small amount of regret, she realized it was the best love she'd had since Dave. 3 hours ago, John met her at the door of her apartment when she came home from work. She saw his packed bags near the door. He gave no excuse, just said he was leaving. He never once made eye contact as he picked up his bags and left. Why had he muttered, "cheating woman," as he carried his last bag out the door? She hadn't so much as looked at another man since she'd met him. Pam dried her eyes and looked at the mail lying unopened on the coffee table. There was 1 blank envelope and 2 bills. She had resisted the temptation to open the enigmatic blank one in her excitement at getting home to John. She picked it up now. It contained a newspaper clipping. She was confused. Why would someone hand-deliver a story about some stupid hunter who had died horribly after being accidentally shot with an arrow? Her face fell as she reached the bottom of the article where it explained that the victim had been formerly known as Michael Brown, who had lived right here in Borderdale. The paper fell from her numb fingers. She thought of Michael. She thought of Pat and Randy. Finally, she thought of Dave. Surely not, she thought. Surely yes, she knew. 4 years ago, she'd had almost everything. In her quest for the last missing piece, she'd ended up with nothing. In a daze, she opened the balcony sliding door and looked at the long but inviting drop down to the car park 12 floors below. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.